In this video, we're answering the question, how does the CARES Act 2020 help doctors? My name's Meredith, and this is the Meredith Callagher Show, where we usually talk about marketing strategy for busy doctors. We believe that hope is not a strategy. Every doctor must put a plan in place for success. Today is April 8th, 2020, and we are right in the middle of the coronavirus crisis all over the world. On March 27, 2020, President Trump signed into law a $2 trillion stimulus package. Within that package, they earmarked $349 billion for small business owners. That includes doctors and private practice owners, anybody with either one employee, a sole proprietorship, up to 500 employees. So it really affects us all, and I had some questions about it. So that's what we're going to go over today. I called one of my favorite podcasters, Shane Tenney of Spa Dameron Tenney LLC. They're a financial company in Charlotte, North Carolina that helps doctors and private practice owners like you with their comprehensive financial needs. I knew Shane would be able to answer all our questions, so we just recorded an interview, and I can't wait to share it with you. But before I do that, why don't you subscribe and ding the bell so you don't miss one of my videos that I usually drop every Tuesday morning, but every once in a while I'm going to throw in a bonus like today. Enjoy. Shane, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Meredith. Appreciate the chance today.
Could you start at the beginning with what the CARE Act is and maybe even when it was announced and when it went into effect?
Yeah, sure. The legislature, the Senate and House of Representatives have worked feverishly over the last couple of weeks, not just in responding to the healthcare crisis around COVID-19, but also to the blossoming economic crisis, the volatility in the stock market, the lack of economic growth, and the ensuing recession that I think we all can feel unfolding beneath us have really given rise to immediate emergency economic stabilization. And so Congress and the president have passed over the last month 3 different significant pieces of legislation at increasing levels of support to the economy. About a week ago, on March 27th, they passed what is the CARES Act, which is a $2 trillion package of economic stabilization to really impact all Americans, from large Fortune 100 companies like the cruise lines and airlines to small business owners like physicians and dentists and everyday middle-class Americans through different provisions of the bill. And so it was designed to have broad-reaching effects that would touch everyone, and we think it's going to do just that.
Great. And then I understand like 349 billion was earmarked for small business owners. Is that right?
Yeah, there's an enormous tranche specifically designed for the 30 million small business owners around the country. Again, many physicians and private practices are going to fall in that subset.
I was really impressed with really the payroll piece. That really one of the aspects the government was thinking about was they don't just want to like keep the business owner afloat. That wasn't necessarily like the individual, but they were really working backwards almost. It seemed like to me, like how could they keep the most Americans out of like bankrupt, the small business owners? Well, if we can keep those small businesses going and keep them paying their employees, then we have a shot at really helping a lot of Americans. Is that how you saw it?
Yeah, I think there's a number of really useful provisions in here. And before we conclude our podcast, help me remember to make sure that we talk about some of the student loan provisions as well, that it certainly will affect a lot of our viewers today. To the point you're making, though, yeah, I think, from the ground floor, the CARES Act included a provision called the recovery rebate. And the recovery rebate is kind of the widely publicized $1,200 checks that will be coming out in the next week or so.
Right.
That's $1,200 for individuals, $2,400 for married couples, but that's going to affect individuals with $75,000 and less of income, or households with $150,000 and less. So typically you wouldn't think of that as being the physician demographic, but it does include physicians in training. So perhaps there's folks listening who are in residency or fellowship that would fall into those income limits,
For
and
sure.
you should expect a direct deposit in the next couple of weeks of $1,000 or $2,400, depending on your marital status. With that said, kind of working up into the topic you were asking about with small business owners,
Right.
the second or another part of the CARES Act is this thinking of economic support for business owners, not just for their own incomes, but capital to allow them to keep their employees on the payroll, even though in many cases their businesses have been shut down based on some of the state and local ordinances and regulations. Or in the case of medical practices, their volumes have been significantly curtailed, or for specialists, they're unable to do elective procedures or surgeries. And so just the
Right.
revenues are plummeting. And so the CARES Act provides sources of funds through two different loan provisions to give money to those practice owners to basically keep their payroll afloat, as well as their mortgage and their utilities and operating costs.
I have so many questions, but I'm going to try to stick to the ones I wrote so I don't get off on a big tangent. But
You can go
one,
anywhere. Go.
thank you. One thing I read that I thought was exciting. So, um, if people are listening and you already had to fire people in your practice, maybe before this bill came out because your revenues were plummeting, I read of these loans we're about to go over, and they go hire people back. That will work too, right? It looked like I read a line that it's okay if you already let people go, you can go get them back, kind of.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I will say,
Yeah.
I think it's only fair to caveat some of our comments here, some of my comments, in that there is new guidance coming out almost daily over the
I
last
know.
couple of days on different aspects of the bill. But to the point you're making, yeah, the current understanding is that employees that have been released, say during the month of March or even early February, uh, can be rehired as part of your headcount before April 27th. And if you apply for the one of these loans on April 27th, it's the headcount then that can contribute to the loan formula.
That's
So
exciting for me because I have talked to a few people that have already been for a good nurse friend of mine and another practice owner, so I thought that was exciting.
yeah, it gives a lot of flexibility. To be clear, there's two key loan provisions that I think have surfaced in some of the publications that are causing questions for our clients and your constituents. The one type of loan is called the Paycheck Protection Program, or the PPP.
Right.
I love how we all come up with acronyms and acrostics very
Like
quickly.
that.
And the
Yeah.
other is what's now called an EIDL loan, and that's EIDL, Economic Injury Disaster Loan. So there are two different buckets of money that the federal government has set aside for small business owners. And by the way, we should interject here that the small business doesn't just mean one person with a couple staff. Small business is basically any entity that has less than 500 employees. So we're talking even large multi-specialty practices are going to qualify for this.
Right.
With this said, the EIDL loan, the EIDL loan, is really designed to provide operating capital to the business for their ongoing use, and all but a tiny portion of that is loan capital that will need to be repaid over a period of time that it looks like is up to 10 years. So we don't see as many medical practices finding use for the EIDL loan provision. It is, in fact, more this triple P or the PPP, Paycheck Protection Program loan provisions, that we think is a better fit for professional service firms like medical practices. And that loan is specifically designed for really about two or three key things. One is payroll, two is rent or mortgage payments, and three is utilities. That's what the PPP is designed for. And its real selling point or attractive nature is the fact that that loan is eligible to be forgiven in its entirety if certain conditions are met.
Awesome. Okay. So let's talk about that loan specifically for a little while. The requirements, the way I understood it, is that the business had to be in business by February 15th, which of this year, 2020. They have to have 500 employees, and they have to have been impacted from the coronavirus. But I guess that's pretty easy to prove, right? If you had to shut down or if you offer elective. I mean, have you seen anybody having issues with proving that they're affected?
No,
No.
no.
Okay.
I think there's a de facto assumption that everyone has been impacted, and certainly any healthcare practice is going to have no trouble being able to demonstrate they've been impacted. So that's not a concern. And just since in my business the devil is in the details, I want to clarify your point.
Please.
Established before February 15th, they need to have 500 or fewer employees, not just
Thank
500
you.
employees. So yeah.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Could you tell us how the loan is calculated? So I meet those requirements, and then I want to guess how much I might be able to get in the loan.
Yep, it's really easy. Again, to talk a little bit about the PPP, what you will do if this sounds of interest to you, or if talking with your practice consultant or your tax advisor, you think it's appropriate to pursue the PPP loan. You'll need to initiate by going to your current established uh, commercial banker, whoever you already bank with. You're going to start there, um,
Mm-hmm.
and they will be able to drive you through the application process. One of the key questions on the application, which you're raising, Meredith, is how much should I even be applying for? And the loan is really simple because it's going to tell you how much you can apply for. One of the very few questions that are asked is, what is your average monthly payroll? And so you'll need to fill in payroll information from 2019. Your payroll information you'll be able to get from your payroll provider. You're going to basically include all the wages and salary of your staff. You can also include retirement and health benefits as well. And then the loan amount is 2.5 times your average monthly payroll and benefits costs. And that's the fixed amount. So for example, if you're a practice with a payroll of $40,000 a month in wages, salary, compensation, benefits, and retirement benefits, then 2.5 times that would be $100,000. That's the most, and that is in fact the amount that you will be applying for.
That's exciting. Okay, I have a question because one of my best friends owns 3 occupational therapy practices in a tiny town in Mississippi. And when she started this process last week, her banker was like, I don't know, I don't know, friend. And I get that. I'm so proud of our federal government for putting this together so fast, but I know they left a lot of vagueness for the
Mhm.
bankers on how to, even what forms to use. And I think, so I guess my question, and I think some of the banks had to create some of their own forms, and that was like unusual to them because they're used to like getting everything handed to them with a neat bow on it, right, from the government. But okay, so for my small town friends or somebody that if they go to a bank, their own banker, and the banker's like, I'm not sure, what should they do next? Like, how could they help their banker help themselves, basically?
Yeah, I'm not surprised to hear the experience that you described. Again, the bill was passed on Friday, March 27th,
Yeah.
and through all of the following week up until the following Friday, there was a ton of interaction between banks, large and small, and the SBA and the Department of the Treasury, answering questions that just needed to be clarified.
Right.
So the experience of many folks when they went to their banker on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday and said, "Hey, I'm interested in this loan," or "I read about it in the Wall Street Journal," or whatever. And the banker said, "I don't know what to tell you." That's
Yeah.
normal, and that was okay. As
Okay.
of Friday, there was a lot of clarity that came out. And so as we moved into April, you and I are recording this on April the 8th. And so the information has been received by many banks. Now, depending on the size of the bank and the scale, different banks have been able to react to that. And many of the larger banks have online application functionality. I think there may be some smaller community banks that are working off paper or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
If there's, if for the practice owner that wants to pursue a Paycheck Protection Program loan, again, the instruction from the Small Business Administration and the Treasury is go to your local bank.
Yeah.
If your local bank says we're not exactly sure what to do or we're figuring that out, I think the course of action is you got to just wait in queue and look to them for guidance. We are beginning to hear, even as recently as yesterday, that some large national banks, whose names I'll leave out of our recording here because it may change by the time somebody's listening to this, have
Right.
already kind of tapped out the amount that's been allotted to them. And so
Mm.
it may be necessary for folks, if you find out your local bank is a dry well, then you may need to ask for a referral or start knocking around, looking at other SBA approved lenders who might be willing to assist you, even though you don't have a previously established relationship there. There definitely is concern that even though there are billions and billions of dollars available, it's still a finite pool that can quickly be tapped.
Right. Okay, got it. And that's an interesting point. I do have good news to report from Mississippi that she was able. There was questions too on what documents the banker needed from her last Friday, but she went back, got her loan filed on Monday, and it was approved. And she said she let me know when the funds, just for research purposes, got to her.
Yeah,
But it was good. So it did happen quickly, like you're saying. It
good.
might.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great. But it sounds like her experience was exactly what I've described, which is confusion
Exactly.
Friday and an answer on Monday. And so
Right.
that's coming through.
Have you heard of when people are receiving funds? They said immediately, right?
The
Yeah.
guidance that we're being given is hopefully beginning the week of April 20th.
Okay.
So there is an underwriting requirement. I mean, it is up to the bank to validate the application and the documentation that's provided. Again, which is very light. You're pretty much just providing a copy of your 2019 payroll. But
Right.
somebody needs to look at that and affirm that this meets the SBA guidelines. And once that's done, then they're accessing the capital. So at this point, we're hearing April 20th. I kind of wouldn't be surprised if that even gets pushed back another week, but it should be relatively soon.
That's good. Let's talk about how that this is a loan, but most likely if you just what do you need to prove to have the loan forgiven, which is super exciting.
Yeah. So again, the current understanding of the loan program is that the PPP is going to be established at 2.5 times your payroll. It
Right.
is a 2-year loan at a 1% interest rate, and the first payment will be due 6 months after the loan is originated.
Okay.
When that first payment comes due, then the borrower will have the chance to apply for forgiveness. And what we're told is that uh, the eligibility for forgiveness is simply proving that the funds were used for eligible expenses. What are eligible expenses? They are the payroll that you paid for 8 weeks following the date of the loan, and rent, mortgage, and utilities. So if the sum of those things equals or exceeds the amount of the loan, then the loan balance should be forgiven. If the sum of those things is less than the balance that you borrowed, that portion would be forgiven, and you'd simply need to pay back the remaining portion, again at 1% over 2 years.
So not that we're recommending it, but you could borrow the loan that's calculated on your past payroll and use it for other things in your business. You just have to pay it back at a 1% interest rate. But if you use it for payroll, rent, or mortgage, did I say it right? Then you could get it forgiven and you don't owe anything. I get so excited talking about it for people.
Yeah, that's the guidance. I will say that in the loan application, you are certifying that your intent is to use the funds for those
Oh, so
purposes.
you're not really supposed to use it for
Yeah,
other things.
it is not. I mean, it is important to understand it's not designed for operating capital. It is not designed to use those funds to go out and buy new equipment or buy new technology for the practice or those sorts of things. That is what the idle loan is for. And so if you run a larger practice or a multi-specialty practice, or you see the current environment creating some opportunity for you where you want capital, then you
Right.
may want to consider applying for a PPP loan for your payroll and your rent and occupancy, and an idle loan to sustain or grow the business.
Okay. Thank you. See, I appreciate that clarity. Is there something I missed on that you want to tell everybody, question wise, or that we
Around
missed?
PPP?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I think the other element of this that folks need to contemplate or talk with your accountant or practice consultant or financial advisor is, based on the unique circumstances for your practice, what is the best timing for your loan, and how might your state's unemployment benefits factor in? We are seeing some specialty groups, say, for example, plastic surgery, or groups that do a significant amount of elective procedures that are effectively out of business or closed down based on their state's requirements.
Right.
If your doors are closed, then and may be closed through June 1st or June 15th or an unknown period of time, it may be advisable to consider furloughing your employees so that they can file for unemployment benefits. Doing so will entitle them to presumably about $950 a week, which is an annualized salary of about $50,000, and they can collect those unemployment benefits while the doors are closed. And then once, if you apply for PPP and get that loan, then those funds could be used to cover some payroll once they come back to work. Again, so there's a lot of details and timing in here, so I'm certainly not intending to give any recommendation or advice, just raising another type of strategy that may apply to some practices out there.
Okay, I have a question in my head. Quite a few therapists and psychiatrists that we work with for marketing, that they're just really sole proprietors. Do you, but I would assume they could apply, if they pay themselves a salary from their practice, that would qualify for the PPP loan, right? Because a lot of them they are actually working, but with some of them are taking reduced rates with telehealth appointments, or so it's still, a loan might be helpful for them.
Yep.
It would apply, right?
And the intent was for these funds to be available even for those sole proprietors. And we're getting, I would certainly think that depending on the corporate status of some of the, sole proprietors you mentioned, if they're set up as an S corporation and drawing a salary, then they would definitely be entitled even to unemployment benefits. For those that may be independent contractors or do moonlighting or side work, and just filing a Schedule C, it does appear that the PPP is, the intent was to make funds available for those individuals as well. I will say that is still a little bit of a gray area, and I wouldn't waste any time in trying to explore that with your bank and your advisor to see if that might be available for you.
Got it. I know I did see, but I know that for our online business, we pay quite a few independent contractors. And at first they were including that as counting as employees, but now that wouldn't apply, but it's just fine. It was just interesting for me to watch how fast it was changing.
Oh, absolutely. It's been daily, and in some parts, intraday. I know at the beginning of this week, the interest rate on PPP loans had been set. It was expected it was going to be 4%. As of the end of last week, it was 0.5%. And then I think just yesterday, the interest rate was readjusted to 1%. So we're seeing rapid interpretations and adjustments.
Do you think it'll lock in by that day, 27th? You mentioned the EIDL loan. My last question, you talked about what individuals are going to get in if you make under 75,000, or if you're married and making under 150,000, then you'll qualify for the 1,200. Is that but the stimulus check, right? But is there any other aspects of the $1 trillion stimulus package that medical practitioners are?
This brings me back. Thanks for reminding me. This was the other provision that I think has a big impact for healthcare providers and physicians. In the bill, there's specific relief provided for borrowers of federal student loans. And so it's important that everything I'm going to say pertains to federal loans, not private loans. But if you have a federal student loan, two things are true, or maybe a couple. One is the interest rate has been set as of last month, I think February the 15th, at 0% interest. There's nothing you need to do. Interest rates, regardless of whether you borrowed money back in the mid 2000s at 2 or 3%, or whether you're a recent medical school graduate with loans at 6 or 7%, your rate has been set at 0% by the federal government until September 30th of this year. The second thing that's true is that they have immediately suspended all automatic payments. And so whether you write a check every month, which I highly doubt, But if you're on automatic bank draft, that has been suspended for you. And so there will be no payment draft, is our understanding, until September 30th. You are allowed to make payments if you want to, but there's no interest accruing, there's no interest due, and there's no payment due. The unique aspect of this is not only is it a nice help in terms of your cash flow, but for those borrowers who are pursuing public service loan forgiveness, where there's an obligation to make 120 qualifying payments, the bill has deemed these months of no payments as qualifying payments. So if you need to make 120 payments to qualify for public service loan forgiveness over the next 6 months, there is no payment due, but they're still going to give you credit for 6 months worth of payments towards that loan forgiveness. So that's a really neat benefit of the bill that maybe doesn't put cash in hand, but it leaves cash in hand because you're not having to make loans. The last point about student loans that is important to know is that there's a provision in the bill that allows employers to provide up to $5,250 in tax-free student loan payments to borrowers this year. And it's not
only... So like if I employed somebody that had a loan, I could provide them with... Okay, got it.
Yeah, and to be clear, we've certainly seen this happen with physicians when they sign employment contracts with different groups or hospitals. The hospital system may agree to give them $10,000 a year toward their student loans for 2 or 3 years as kind of a signing incentive. Up till now, that $10,000 student loan stipend, so to speak, it can be given. It's deductible to the employer, but it's been treated as taxable income to the employee. So even though they're giving me $10,000, I do owe taxes on it and then pay it on my student loan. This bill carves out $5,250 as tax-free to the employee, but deductible to the employer. And we see that as a huge trendsetter. And the expectation is that's something that folks have been asking for years. We kind of expect that will likely get extended beyond this year. And so it becomes an interesting dynamic. Personally, I'm curious to see if resident graduates and fellows going into practice are aware of that and begin to try and negotiate that provision in more of their employment contracts.
That's what I was about to ask. Is this something you recommend if you're getting hired, mentioning, say, hey, you could pay me and we'd both
I certainly would.
it?
Absolutely. Yeah, for those folks finishing their training in June of this year or looking at employment contracts now, I would absolutely put my hand up and say, hey, I'm just curious, could we arrange for a little student loan stipend here under the CARES Act?
Shade, I really could keep you all day because like I said at the beginning, I love to talk about numbers, but I won't take too much more of your time. My daughter just came in. She can't stand it to tell me she finished with her school for the day. I was like, I don't know if you guys giving her the hand and she's still just whispering.
Yep.
How's your family doing? I didn't even ask.
They're good. All 4 of them are in homeschool now, and I think they're loving it. I'm not so much the mom homeschool teacher is loving it, but we're making it okay.
I mean, it's a challenge for those of us all of us that weren't trained teachers, right?
Yeah, that's for sure. I'm lucky to be able to escape up the walk to continue working.
We have a house, that sometimes I wondered if we bought too big or if we should have gone smaller. But like every morning I wake up and say, thank you for this, that we're in this house where we have a little room. Please, escape, that was a good decision. Yeah. Well, I appreciate your time. And I if you don't mind, if some big change comes up, you might get an email from me asking for clarity because I really appreciate the information that you gave us. And a lot of the wellness practitioners and the doctors in our group, they don't have time to stop right now and read, all the information. So there really are some cut and dry. I'm going to, I appreciate your blog article and answering our questions today, but I said to you in the email, I don't want us to necessarily recommend everybody has to, apply for this. I just want them to have the information, but it is exciting to think that if you're considering having to let employees go or that you could maybe keep your practice going with this loan, right? Everybody should take a look at it.
Yeah, it's. I think your point is a good one, which is um, it's challenging times for sure, and there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of chaos going on, and a lot of confusion. But there are resources available to most practice owners to give them options on how they navigate the next couple months.
Right. That, which is good. Well, thank you, Shane, and stay safe. And I really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Meredith. Pleasure being with you.
Bye.